Ryan Mercer stood tall in his crisp new uniform, the badge gleaming on his chest as he accepted his diploma from the police academy. At 24 years old, with short brown hair and a strong jaw, he looked every bit the part of a model officer. The ceremony hall erupted in applause as the academy director announced him as the third highest graduate in his class. "I always knew I'd be standing here," Ryan told his proud parents after the ceremony. His father, a former military man, clapped him hard on the shoulder while his mother wiped away tears. Ryan had always been exceptional at whatever he set his mind to: star quarterback in high school, honors student, and now a top police academy graduate. Life had come easily to him in the small, mostly white suburb of Meadowbrook where he'd grown up. His success reinforced his belief that hard work and following the rules were all anyone needed to succeed. Mercer has outstanding technical skills, his training officer had written in his final evaluation. Shows exceptional marksmanship and physical aptitude, but at the bottom of the page, in smaller writing, could benefit from more experience with diverse communities. Occasionally displays rigidity in judgment. Ryan hadn't seen that part of the evaluation. If he had, he might have dismissed it anyway. In his mind, rules existed for a reason, and his job was to enforce them. Simple as that. His first few weeks on the job passed in a blur of traffic stops, paperwork, and routine patrols. Ryan approached each task with intense focus, determined to prove himself to the senior officers. He memorized the police code book, studied local ordinances at night, and volunteered for extra shifts whenever possible. "Slow down, rookie," his partner, Officer Garcia, often told him. This isn't a race, but Ryan couldn't slow down. He needed to show everyone he was the best. One evening, after Ryan had issued 3 tickets for minor infractions that most officers would have handled with warnings, Garcia pulled him aside in the station parking lot. "Look, Mercer, I get that you're eager, but you need to understand something. Being a good cop isn't just about knowing every rule in the book. It's about judgment, knowing when to enforce and when to show mercy." Ryan nodded politely, but didn't really take the words to heart. In his mind, showing mercy was just another way of saying not doing your job properly. When Captain Winters assigned him to courthouse duty the following week, Ryan saw it as an opportunity to impress his superiors with his attention to detail and commitment to procedure. "It's just filling in for Jefferson while he's on vacation," the captain explained. "Mostly security screening, checking IDs, that sort of thing. Nothing complicated." "I won't let you down, sir," Ryan replied with a sharp salute that made some of the older officers exchange glances. The night before his courthouse assignment, Ryan studied the security protocols meticulously. The courthouse was the heart of the justice system, and he would be its guardian. He imagined himself stopping a potential security threat, perhaps earning a commendation or even a promotion. Little did Ryan know that his by-the-book approach was about to collide with reality in a way he never expected. His encounter with Judge William Bennett would challenge everything he thought he knew about authority, respect, and the true meaning of justice. As Ryan set his alarm and laid out his uniform for the next day, he had no idea that the most important lesson of his career was waiting for him at the county courthouse. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Judge William Bennett's modest home study. At 58, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that had seen decades of human struggle, he sat reviewing case files for the day ahead. A framed photo on his desk showed a much younger Bennett standing proudly in front of the courthouse, the first day he'd worn his judicial robes. 20 years, he said softly to himself, running a finger along the frame. 2 decades on the bench had taught him more about human nature than the law books ever could. Judge Bennett hadn't been born into privilege. The son of a factory worker and a nurse, he'd grown up in the working-class east side of the city. His parents had scrimped and saved to help him become the first in their family to attend college and later law school. The path hadn't been easy. As one of only 3 black students in his law program, he faced everything from subtle dismissals to outright hostility. "You'll have to work twice as hard to get half as far," his father had told him, and he had. Bennett started as a public defender, representing those who couldn't afford legal help. For 12 years, he fought for fair treatment for his clients, many of whom came from backgrounds similar to his own. His reputation for thorough preparation and unwavering integrity eventually caught the attention of the governor, who appointed him to the bench. In his kitchen, Bennett's wife Diane poured him a second cup of coffee. "Big day today?" she asked, knowing his schedule was always full. Just the usual, he replied with a smile. 23 cases on the docket. Mostly minor offenses, a few sentencing hearings. What he didn't say was how each of those 23 cases represented a human life, a story, a set of circumstances that had brought someone before his bench. Bennett never forgot that. His colleagues often commented on his courtroom style, firm but fair, demanding respect for the process while showing compassion for the people caught up in it. Young lawyers sometimes mistook his quiet demeanor for weakness, but they quickly learned their error when his sharp questions cut through weak arguments. Justice isn't just about rules, he often told new clerks. It's about understanding the spirit behind them. Bennett had faced his share of challenges on the bench. Being the first black judge in the district had put him under constant scrutiny. Some lawyers had questioned his qualifications behind his back. Some defendants had used slurs under their breath, but Bennett had never let it shake his commitment to fairness and the law. As he prepared to leave for work, he slipped his reading glasses into his suit pocket and kissed Diane goodbye. "Don't forget dinner with the Washingtons tonight," she reminded him. "I won't," he promised, though they both knew court sometimes ran long. The drive to the courthouse was his time to center himself. Bennett used these quiet moments to prepare mentally for the decisions ahead. Today was no different, just another Tuesday serving the community he loved. He didn't wear his judicial robes for the drive, of course. Those waited in his chambers, and in his rush this morning, he'd left his courthouse ID badge in his other suit jacket. It wasn't usually a problem. After 20 years, everyone at the courthouse knew Judge Bennett. As he pulled into his reserved parking space, Bennett noticed an unfamiliar police cruiser in the security officer's spot. Jefferson must be on vacation, he thought, wondering who would be filling in. The judge gathered his briefcase and nodded to the usual faces as he entered through the side door, the one reserved for courthouse staff. He had no way of knowing that the young officer standing at attention inside was about to create one of the most memorable moments of his long career. Judge Bennett walked toward his chambers, completely unaware that his day was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would test his patience, wisdom, and capacity for understanding in ways he couldn't imagine. Officer Ryan Mercer arrived at the county courthouse a full hour before his shift. The massive stone building, with its tall columns and wide steps, seemed to demand respect. Ryan straightened his uniform one last time before entering through the staff entrance. "You must be filling in for Jefferson," said Martha, the elderly clerk who manned the security desk. She handed him a clipboard with the day's schedule. "Busy one today. Judge Bennett's got a full docket." "Yes, ma'am," Ryan replied, standing at near attention. "Officer Mercer reporting for Judy." Martha raised an eyebrow at his formality but continued her briefing. "Main entrance opens to the public at 8:30. Most staff come through that side door over there." She pointed to a door with a keycard scanner. "Judges and senior officials have their own entrance around back." Ryan nodded, taking mental notes of everything. "And everyone needs ID, correct? No exceptions." "Well, technically yes, but we all know each other here." "The security protocol clearly states all personnel must display proper identification at all times," Ryan interrupted, tapping the handbook he'd studied the night before. Martha sighed. "Yes, that's what it says. Just use your judgment, okay? It's going to be hectic today." By 8:30, the courthouse lobby was filling with people. Ryan stood at his post, scanning each person who entered, making them empty pockets and run bags through the scanner. He was thorough, more thorough than Jefferson had ever been, by the looks of surprise on regular visitors' faces. "Sir, please remove your belt as well," Ryan instructed an older attorney who had been coming to the courthouse for 30 years. "Jefferson never makes me do that," the man grumbled. "I'm not Officer Jefferson," Ryan replied crisply. "Protocol says all metal objects must be removed." As the morning wore on, a line began to form. People shifted impatiently, checking watches and phones. Ryan didn't rush. Security couldn't be compromised just because people were in a hurry. By 9:15, the situation was tense. Court sessions were starting, but dozens of people remained in line. The clerk from Judge Bennett's courtroom appeared, looking stressed. "Officer, we need to get these people through faster. Judge Bennett is waiting to start proceedings." "I'm following proper security protocols," Ryan said firmly. I can't compromise safety because people are running late. Behind him, he could hear murmurs of frustration. A defense attorney was loudly complaining about missing her hearing time. Two witnesses for a case were arguing with each other. The noise level in the lobby rose steadily. Sweat formed on Ryan's forehead. This wasn't how he had imagined courthouse duty, but he wouldn't back down. Rules were rules, and his job was to enforce them. Just then, the side door opened. A middle-aged black man in an expensive suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. He nodded politely to the clerks as he walked purposefully toward the main courtroom. Ryan immediately noticed something wrong: no visible ID badge. Without hesitation, he stepped away from his post and moved to intercept the man. "Excuse me, sir," Ryan called out, his voice cutting through the lobby noise. "I need to see your courthouse identification." The man turned, mild surprise on his face. "I'm Judge Bennett. I'm running late for my own courtroom." "I'm sorry, sir, but I need to see ID. Everyone needs proper identification to enter the secure area." Ryan stood firm, hand raised in a stopping gesture. The entire lobby fell silent. Everyone seemed to freeze in place. Martha at the security desk closed her eyes as if in pain. Judge Bennett blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Young man, I've been a judge in this courthouse for 20 years. I seem to have left my badge in my other jacket this morning." Ryan didn't budge. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't make exceptions. Security protocol is very clear." The silence in the lobby grew heavier. People exchanged glances, some embarrassed, others curious to see what would happen next. No one had ever stopped Judge Bennett before. The judge studied the young officer's face, noting the nervousness behind the rigid expression. A tense moment stretched between them as everyone waited to see what would happen next. The tension in the courthouse lobby was thick enough to cut with a knife. Judge Bennett stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable as he faced the young officer. Ryan Mercer's hand remained raised in a stopping gesture, though a small tremor had begun in his fingers. "Young man," Judge Bennett said, his voice calm but firm, "I understand you're doing your job, but I am Judge William Bennett, and I have a courtroom full of people waiting for me." Ryan swallowed hard but stood his ground. "I'm sorry, sir, but without proper identification, I cannot allow you to enter the restricted area. Those are the rules." A few feet away, Martha frantically waved to get Ryan's attention. "Officer Mercer, that is Judge Bennett," she stage whispered. "He presides over courtroom 3. It's okay to let him through." Ryan's face flushed red, but his stance didn't change. "Ma'am, with all due respect, the security protocol states that all personnel must display proper identification at all times. No exceptions." The crowd of waiting citizens and attorneys had grown completely silent, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of disbelief and fascination. No one had ever seen anyone challenge Judge Bennett's authority in his own courthouse. "Perhaps someone from my staff could verify my identity," Judge Bennett suggested reasonably. "My clerk, Ms. Winters, or my bailiff could confirm who I am." Ryan shook his head. "That's not how security protocols work, sir. I need to see official ID." His voice grew louder with each word, betraying his nervousness. Anyone could claim to be a judge. At this, a murmur rippled through the onlookers. Several attorneys exchanged glances of disbelief. A court reporter covered her mouth with her hand. Judge Bennett's expression shifted subtly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the young officer. "Are you suggesting that I'm impersonating a judge, Officer Mercer?" Ryan hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "No, sir, I'm just saying that without proper ID." "Because that would be quite a bold claim," the judge continued, his voice gaining a sharper edge, "to accuse the chief judge of this district of identity fraud in his own courthouse." The color drained from Ryan's face as he realized he might have made a terrible mistake, but his training told him to stick to protocol. "Sir, I'm just following the rules." "The rules." Judge Bennett repeated the words thoughtfully. "Yes, rules are important, but so is judgment." He set his briefcase down and straightened to his full height. "What's your name, officer?" "Officer Ryan Mercer, sir." "Officer Mercer, how long have you been with the force?" 3 months, sir, but I graduated 3rd in my class at the academy." Judge Bennett nodded slowly. "I see. And this is your first time on courthouse duty?" "Yes, sir. I'm filling in for Officer Jefferson." "I thought as much." The judge checked his watch. Officer Mercer, I have 23 cases on my docket today. Citizens waiting for justice. Attorneys who have prepared their arguments. A system that requires my presence to function. His voice remained measured but carried throughout the now silent lobby. And you are creating a roadblock to that justice because I left a plastic card at home. Something in Judge Bennett's tone made Ryan straighten his shoulders defensively. Sir, rules exist for a reason. Security can't be compromised for convenience. Indeed, Judge Bennett replied. And security officers exist to protect the court, not obstruct it. Ryan felt his face growing hot again. I'm not obstructing anything. I'm doing my job. His voice had risen enough that several people stepped back. Judge Bennett didn't flinch. Your job, the judge said quietly, is to use both the rules and your judgment to ensure this courthouse functions properly. Right now, you're failing at that. Ryan's mouth opened in shock at the public rebuke. Before he could respond, the courthouse doors opened, and Captain Winters, Ryan's superior officer, walked in. He took one look at the scene and immediately recognized the problem. Judge Bennett. Good morning, sir, the captain said, hurrying over. Is there an issue here? The judge held up a hand. Captain, would you mind if Officer Mercer and I step into jury room 2 for a moment? I think we need to have a private conversation. The captain looked worriedly between them. Of course, Your Honor. Officer Mercer will cooperate fully. As Judge Bennett picked up his briefcase and gestured for Ryan to follow him, whispers erupted throughout the lobby. Everyone watched as the rookie officer, now pale-faced and stiff, followed the judge toward the small jury room. No one knew what was about to happen behind those closed doors. The heavy wooden door of jury room 2 closed with a soft click that seemed to echo in Ryan's ears. His heart hammered in his chest as Judge Bennett placed his briefcase on the long table and gestured for Ryan to take a seat. The small room, with its wood paneling and American flag in the corner, suddenly felt airless and confining. Sir, I want to apologize if Ryan began, his voice unsteady. Not yet. Judge Bennett interrupted, raising a hand. First, let's just sit for a moment. The judge loosened his tie slightly and took a seat across from Ryan. The silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the muffled sounds of the courthouse beyond the door. Ryan's fingers tapped nervously against his leg as he waited for the reprimand he was sure would come, or worse, a call to his captain demanding his removal from duty. Outside in the lobby, the crowd had begun to speculate wildly. That rookie is done for, whispered a veteran defense attorney to her colleague. Bennett will have his badge before lunch. Never seen anything like it, muttered a court clerk. Stopping Judge Bennett, the man's been here longer than half the building. Captain Winters paced near the door, checking his watch repeatedly. Give them 5 minutes, he told Martha at the security desk. Then I'm going in there. Inside the jury room, Judge Bennett finally broke the silence. Do you know why this room is special to me, Officer Mercer? Ryan blinked in surprise. It wasn't the question he'd expected. No, sir. 20 years ago, I waited in this very room to be sworn in as a judge. First black judge in this district. He ran his hand along the wooden table. I sat right here, reviewing the oath I was about to take, wondering if I deserved to be in this building. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, uncertain where this was heading. When I walked out to the courtroom for my swearing-in, the judge continued. A security officer stopped me at the door. Asked to see my ID. A small smile touched his lips. Some things don't change much, do they? Sir, I wasn't. I didn't mean. Ryan struggled to find the right words. I know what you meant, Judge Bennett said, his voice neither angry nor accusatory. You meant to follow the rules, to do your job correctly. There's nothing wrong with that intention. Ryan exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. However, the judge continued, leaning forward slightly, rules without judgment can become weapons rather than tools. Do you understand the difference? I'm not sure I do, sir, Ryan admitted. Judge Bennett nodded thoughtfully. Let me ask you something. If the courthouse was on fire, would you still check everyone's ID before letting them exit? Of course not, sir. That would be ridiculous. Why? The security protocol doesn't list fire as an exception, does it? Ryan frowned. No, but common sense says. Exactly, the judge interrupted gently. Common sense, judgment, the ability to understand when strict adherence to rules serves justice and when it impedes it. Something shifted in Ryan's expression as the point started to sink in. Judge Bennett noticed it and pressed on. Officer Mercer, I don't believe you stopped me today because of security concerns. I think you stopped me because you could, because it gave you a sense of control. Ryan opened his mouth to protest but found he couldn't. The judge's words had struck uncomfortably close to home. Power isn't about making people follow rules. Judge Bennett said quietly, it's about knowing which rules matter, when they matter, and why they matter. For the first time, Ryan truly looked at the man sitting across from him, not as an obstacle to his authority or a violation of protocol, but as a person with decades of experience and wisdom. The realization humbled him. I think I understand, sir, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Judge Bennett checked his watch. We've been in here almost 10 minutes. Your captain is probably ready to break down the door. He stood up, straightening his suit jacket. So what happens next, Officer Mercer? Ryan stood as well, his posture different now, less rigid, more thoughtful. I think that's up to you, Your Honor. The judge smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed his serious face. No, young man, it's up to us. Come with me. As they moved toward the door, neither man knew that what happened next would stun everyone waiting outside and change both their lives forever. As the jury room door closed behind them, Judge Bennett gestured to two chairs facing each other at the center of the long wooden table. The room was quiet, cut off from the noise and tension of the courthouse lobby. Ryan sat stiffly, his back straight, hands resting on his knees. Relax, Officer Mercer, Judge Bennett said, taking off his suit jacket and hanging it carefully on the back of his chair. This isn't an execution. Ryan forced a small smile but kept his posture rigid. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The judge studied him for a moment. Where are you from, Mercer? Meadowbrook, Ryan answered. The north side. Ah, the judge nodded. I know it well. Nice area. Good schools. Yes, sir. My parents still live there. Judge Bennett leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, Officer Mercer. Before today, had you ever met a black judge? The question caught Ryan off guard. He blinked a few times before answering. I don't think so, sir. Had you met many black professionals at all? Doctors, lawyers, professors? Ryan felt heat rising to his face. Not many, he admitted. Meadowbrook isn't very diverse. Judge Bennett nodded, his expression giving nothing away. When I walk into a room, Officer Mercer, what do you see first? The robe? The man? The color of my skin? Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I don't know how to answer that, sir. That's an honest response, at least. The judge smiled slightly. When I was your age, I wanted to be a police officer. This surprised Ryan. You did. Why didn't you become one? The judge's eyes took on a distant look. I applied to the academy. Twice. Both times, I was told there were no openings, despite the department actively recruiting. He tapped his fingers lightly on the table. The third time I applied, a senior officer pulled me aside. Told me some truths about how things really worked back then. Ryan listened intently, beginning to see where this conversation was heading. That officer probably saved me years of frustration. Judge Bennett continued. He suggested law school instead. Said if I wanted to change the system, I might do better from the inside. Is that why you became a judge, to change the system? Judge Bennett chuckled. I became a judge to serve justice. Sometimes that means enforcing the system. Sometimes it means recognizing when the system itself is the problem. He leaned back in his chair, studying the young officer. When you stopped me out there, what were you afraid would happen if you let me pass without ID? Ryan considered the question carefully. That I'd failed to do my job properly. That someone dangerous might slip through. Did I look dangerous to you? No, sir, but rules are rules, the judge finished for him. I understand that thinking. But let me ask you this. If the chief of police walked in without his badge, would you have stopped him with the same enthusiasm? Ryan's silence was answer enough. I'm not saying you're a bad person, Officer Mercer, Judge Bennett said kindly. I'm suggesting that we all have blind spots, assumptions we don't even realize we're making. Outside, the minute hand on the wall clock ticked loudly. Ryan found himself noticing details about Judge Bennett he hadn't before: the slight gray at his temples, the wedding ring worn smooth with age, the careful way he chose his words. "I stopped you because of the rules," Ryan said finally. "But maybe I enforced them the way I did because you didn't match what I expected a judge to look like." Judge Bennett nodded, a hint of approval in his eyes. "That's a difficult thing to admit. Most people never get that far." "What happens now?" Ryan asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Am I going to lose my job?" The judge stood, reaching for his jacket. "That depends on what you learned today. Tell me, Officer Mercer, what's the most important quality for someone in your position?" Ryan thought for a moment. "I used to think it was being firm, following procedure exactly." He looked up at the judge. "Now I'm thinking it might be wisdom, knowing when to bend without breaking." Judge Bennett smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. "I couldn't have said it better myself. Now, shall we go back out there and show them what that looks like in practice?" As they moved toward the door, Ryan felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, and a new understanding taking its place. The courthouse lobby fell silent as the door to Jury Room 2 swung open. All eyes turned to watch Judge Bennett emerge, followed closely by Officer Ryan Mercer. The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Court employees, attorneys, and citizens waiting for their hearings all held their breath, expecting to witness the young officer's humiliation or termination. Captain Winters stepped forward immediately, his face tight with concern. "Your Honor, I want to personally apologize for Annie." Judge Bennett raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "No apology necessary, Captain. Officer Mercer and I have had a productive conversation." The surprise on the captain's face was mirrored throughout the lobby. People exchanged confused glances. This was not the outcome anyone had expected after such a public confrontation. Ryan stood straighter than before, but there was something different about his posture. The rigid, by-the-book stiffness had been replaced by something more natural, more confident. His face, though still serious, had lost its defensive hardness. "Officer Mercer," Judge Bennett said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed room, "I believe you have something to say." Ryan turned to face the crowd. For a brief moment, he looked like he might falter, but then he cleared his throat and spoke with genuine conviction. "I want to apologize to everyone for the disruption I caused this morning." His gaze swept across the lobby, making brief eye contact with those he kept waiting. "In my effort to follow rules perfectly, I created unnecessary delays and showed disrespect to Judge Bennett and this court." Martha at the security desk blinked in surprise. A defense attorney in the front of the line actually dropped her briefcase. "While security is important," Ryan continued, "I failed to use proper judgment in applying the rules. I'm sorry for any inconvenience this caused, and I appreciate your patience." A murmur rippled through the crowd. No one had expected such a sincere and humble statement from the officer who, just 15 minutes earlier, had been so stubbornly defiant. Judge Bennett placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "Thank you, Officer Mercer." He then addressed the waiting crowd. "Now, we have justice to deliver today. Let's proceed." The judge turned to Captain Winters. "Captain, with your permission, I'd like Officer Mercer to observe court proceedings today. I think it would be educational for him to see what happens after people pass through security." The captain, still looking somewhat bewildered, quickly nodded. "Of course, Your Honor. Whatever you think best." As Judge Bennett moved toward his courtroom, people parted to make way, many nodding respectfully. Ryan followed a few steps behind, aware of the curious stares following him. "What just happened?" a clerk whispered to Martha. "I have no idea," she replied, shaking her head in wonder. "I was sure that boy was about to get fired." Inside courtroom 3, Judge Bennett took his place on the bench while Ryan was directed to a seat near the bailiff. The judge put on his reading glasses and addressed the packed room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay this morning. We have a full docket, so let's proceed efficiently." He glanced at Ryan. "We are fortunate to have Officer Mercer observing our proceedings today." As the first case was called, Ryan watched with growing interest. He observed how Judge Bennett listened carefully to each person who came before him: defendants, attorneys, witnesses, giving them his full attention regardless of their status or background. The judge was firm when necessary but showed unexpected compassion in certain cases. When a young first-time offender stood trembling before the bench, Judge Bennett spoke to him not with condemnation but with concern and clarity about actions and consequences. Throughout the morning, Ryan found himself taking mental notes, not just about court procedures, but about how Judge Bennett wielded his authority with respect, wisdom, and a deep understanding of the humans standing before him. By lunchtime, when court recessed, Ryan had witnessed more than just legal proceedings. He had seen justice administered with humanity, something no police academy manual had ever taught him. As people filed out of the courtroom, Judge Bennett caught Ryan's eye and gave him a small nod. The simple gesture felt like both approval and an invitation to something more important than Ryan had yet realized. 5 years passed since that fateful morning at the county courthouse. The security desk where Officer Ryan Mercer once stood was now occupied by a friendly veteran officer named Rodriguez. The massive stone building looked the same, but many faces inside had changed. On a warm Tuesday morning, Captain Ryan Mercer walked up the courthouse steps in his dress uniform. At 29, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that had replaced his once rigid demeanor. The silver captain's bars on his shoulders caught the sunlight as he nodded to familiar faces. "Captain Mercer." "Good to see you," called Martha, still manning the reception desk after all these years. "He's waiting for you in courtroom 3. "Thanks, Martha," Ryan smiled. "Hard to believe it's been 5 years already." 5 years since you nearly got yourself fired," she chuckled. "Who would have thought you'd end up where you are now?" Ryan laughed, shaking his head. "Certainly not me." He made his way through the security checkpoint, showing his ID without being asked. As he walked the familiar hallway to courtroom 3, his mind drifted back to the changes of the past 5 years. After that day observing court, Judge Bennett had invited Ryan to lunch. That lunch led to more conversations, which evolved into a mentorship that transformed Ryan's approach to law enforcement. The judge had introduced him to community leaders, arranged ride-alongs in neighborhoods Ryan had never visited, and challenged his thinking about justice and authority. Within a year, Ryan had transferred to community policing. Within 3, he was leading workshops on de-escalation techniques. His rapid rise through the ranks surprised everyone except Judge Bennett. Courtroom 3 was empty except for one person when Ryan entered. Judge William Bennett, now retired, sat in the gallery rather than behind the bench. At 63, his hair was fully silver, but his eyes remained sharp and kind. "Right on time, Captain," Bennett said, standing to shake Ryan's hand warmly. "I learned from the best, sir," Ryan replied. "Punctuality is respect made visible." The older man smiled, recognizing his own words quoted back to him. "The ceremony starts in an hour. I thought we might talk here first, where it all began." They sat side by side in the empty courtroom, their voices echoing slightly in the large space. "The police academy graduates are lucky to have you speaking today," Bennett said. "What will you tell them?" Ryan looked thoughtful. "That the badge gives them authority, but not wisdom. That justice isn't just about enforcing rules, it's about understanding why the rules exist in the first place." "Good," Bennett nodded approvingly. "And will you tell them about that day? About stopping a judge at security?" "I tell that story to every rookie I train," Ryan laughed. "It's become something of a legend in the department." They fell silent for a moment, both remembering that day from their different perspectives. "You know," Ryan said finally, "I almost didn't come back after lunch that day. I was so embarrassed. But watching you in court, seeing how you treated every person with dignity, even when they'd made mistakes, it changed something in me." "People can surprise you," Bennett said, "both in their capacity to make poor choices and in their ability to learn from them." He gave Ryan a meaningful look. Ryan nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. "The new community outreach program launches next month. We've already got 15 officers signed up for the mentorship initiative." "And the Police Youth Advisory Council?" 20 high school students selected. "We're meeting weekly at the community center in Eastwood." Bennett's face lit up with genuine pleasure. From stopping a black judge to building bridges between police and communities of color. "Quite a journey, Captain Mercer." Ryan's expression turned serious. "I wouldn't be here without that moment, without you choosing patience over punishment that day." I recognize something in you, the retired judge said simply. Beneath the rigidity was a good officer who needed guidance, not discipline. As they stood to leave for the graduation ceremony, Ryan looked around the empty courtroom once more. You know what still amazes me, he said. How 15 minutes in a jury room changed the entire course of my life. Judge Bennett placed a hand on the younger man's shoulder, just as he had done 5 years before. That's how transformation works, Captain Mercer. Not in grand gestures, but in small moments of truth between two people willing to listen. Together, they walked out of the courtroom toward a future neither could have imagined on that fateful morning 5 years ago.